Hello, and welcome. So we are live on Critical Reflections with your critical friend, and today we have Alistair Smith, JB, and really we're thinking about Mental Health Week, which is next week. So Mental Health Week being next week, we will be speaking about mental health. So I just want to welcome Alistair. Welcome to the live stream.
Tony, thank you for your warm welcome. You can see my big smile. I'm excited to be there. We've been talking about this for a long time, so it's really good to be here. And I want to say thank you everyone who is tuning in. You're right, it is Mental Health Awareness Week next week, and we're doing a lot of preparation and work towards that even right now. So thank you for the invitation, Tony.
No worries. So Alistair, what I'd like you to really do is to just introduce yourself. I think we've got some live technical glitches. So while I work that through, if you could be so kind as to introduce yourself, and I can get this sorted. So just tell us what it is that you're doing.
Sure, Tony, thank you. The name is Alistair Smith Abaje. As you can see, I'm the Chief Exec for Lambeth and Southwark Mind. We are a mental health and wellbeing charity, Tony. We're part of a federated mind of National Mind. So we have federated minds. There are 110 local minds that work nationally. So wherever you are in the United Kingdom, I'm proud to say that there is a mind locally in your district. Where I'm working is in Lambeth and Southwark. So that's what I do. That's what I work. Tony, I do that with passion because there's a lot of needs around mental health, particularly in the area where I work in Lambeth and Southwark.
Okay, that's a fantastic introduction. And we have a few technical glitches, but I think it's sorted now. I've worked my technical wizardry, and we should be back in action. I can see some people on the feed as well. So yes, I'm getting there, everyone. But thank you so much. If you are here joining us, then do just drop your name in the comments and I can give you a shout out as well. As I've said, this is Mental Health Awareness Week next week. We have the fabulous Alistair Smith of JB, and he's from Lambeth and Southwark Mind in the UK. So really, we just want to raise awareness about what's coming up next week, some tips for you. Alistair's also going to share some of his own observations in his own capacity, and really the theme this year is anxiety. So if you are with us, let me know and I will give you a shout out. So we've got Melody from Massachusetts. Thank you so much for joining, Melody. And now that we are technically connected. So thank you so much, Alistair. And I know that I've got the hotline number, which I'm going to put on a ticker just very, very shortly. Mm-hmm. So as I said, it's anxiety is the theme at the moment. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me, first of all, Alistair. It's really been an absolute pleasure. And some anxiety. So what do you think of the theme for next week? Anxiety. Is that something that you found a great deal of?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunately, Tony, anxiety is one of many symptoms that affect people mentally. So nationally, we've chosen this topic because it affects a lot of people. But not just anxiety, people have depression, people have psychosis, they require psychotherapy, and they have a number of other disorders that affect them. But anxiety is an area that affects a lot of people as well. I see that locally, but nationally it's something that's affecting. So to give you a perspective, at the moment, Tony, before the pandemic, we were looking at maybe 1 in 4 people were affected with some type of mental health challenge. I use the word challenge because it's something that you can overcome with support. But post-pandemic, I would say that we are now looking at least 2 in 4 or 3 in 4 people are affected. So you're talking about every other person in some way or the other have been affected by trauma.
Well, it's more than every other, isn't it? If it's
exactly
3 out of 4, if it's as much as 3 out of 4, it's out of 4 people, 3
it's
will
a worrying
be.
statistic, but it's something that even if you haven't been affected, we all know somebody in our family, amongst our friendship groups, in our workplace, somebody we know has been affected by some sort of mental health trauma. So there is anxiety, as we mentioned at the beginning, there is depression, there's a host of other mental health challenges that are affecting people. We're talking at the moment, Tony, the UK itself, the worldwide population, the statistic is greater. And
I can hear the passion in your voice already, Alistair. You know, you just got straight in there giving people some of these facts and information. 3 out of 4, that is ginormous. So I just want to know as well. So we've got anxiety, which is the key theme. You know, so that's good. That's a little bit hard to recognize, isn't it? So, you know, how will people be recognizing that? Let's talk about it from the workforce perspective, the workplace, the organizational perspective, and then let's talk about it from a person perspective, an individual. So, you know, let me
And I think it's a great place to start, Tony, because I think because of the pandemic, we're in an environment now where we are working more from home. We are working, remotely. And what you find, Tony, is, you know, either we like it or not, a lot of us are working a lot more hours than we were before. So what you find, Tony, the symptom is that, well, we are overloading ourselves. We're not having sufficient breaks. And if you're not having sufficient breaks, you get very tired, you get stressed. And if you've got a lot of deadlines, that adds to the whole well-being issue with ourselves. And if we're doing that over a long period of time, that's going to wear us down and we're going to become anxious with our deadlines. We're not resting, we're not sleeping, we're not relaxing. Some of us are not even exercising because we're used to, Tony, jump in the car, or if you're in the UK, go on a train that always runs late to get to work. And we're not doing that. So you're getting a break in between.
And you're stressing about the late trains as well, aren't you? You're stressing about the late trains.
That makes you anxious.
Absolutely. Or is it going to be a strike? Am I going to be able to get there? Or what am I going to do with my children?
And there's all these strikes at the moment in the UK. But coming back to your question, Tony, that some of the symptoms are that people become very irritable. Some people, they appear very tired, fatigued. Some people are very argumentative because they're just not relaxed. And if you're not relaxed...
So this is really important. Let's go back. Let's come to this for a moment. So these are some of the signs that you're explaining to recognize anxiety. So if somebody is maybe a little bit anxious or more anxious than usual, you know, presenting anxiously, you know, we shouldn't really just overlook it. We should question it. Or, you know, is their workload too much? Is it too much for them?
Correct.
Are they sleeping well? You know, this kind of thing. And this is where compassion comes in. You absolutely know I'm going to get the word compassion in there somewhere. But this is where we need to pay closer attention, because people don't look at anxiety as an illness as such. So it's nothing. It's nothing. Just the work pressure. Oh, it's just called work, you know. And
get on with it. Get on with it.
Put it under that umbrella. So that's really important that you've identified that. So I'm going to ask you to kind of, you know, do it in a bullet style fashion while I say hi to David Pushkin. Thank you so much for joining, David. Hailing from London, such an important topic. Absolutely. Mental health and mental health awareness, having the conversation, breaking the stigma is so important. And this is kind of why I do the Tony McClelland Show. I want to have these conversations here. I want to get people on here that are happy to have these kind of really tough conversations, because it needs to be out there. And it's so much of it is taboo. It's getting better, but taboo, discrimination, being labeled, stereotyped, stigmatized, all of these things, you know, add to the anxiety as well, because if you talk about it, there's a fear that people are going to look at you in a particular way. So thank you so much.
And there are some solutions to that, Tony, in regard to, you mentioned the word stigma. If a staff member doesn't feel empowered to share, that is a challenge. But what we are doing as a local charity and a national charity is encouraging employees to have what's called a wellness plan. So a wellness plan is something that's devised on a monthly basis. You have an appraisal for your performance, but alongside your appraisal, we operate what's called a wellness plan. And what that is, Tony, it's a check-in every month with your employee. How are you doing with your health, your family, your exercise, and so forth? And it allows the individual to talk about the struggles that they're going through without being judged.
Thank you so much. And just for those that have just joined us, and for those that are watching later, watching the replay later on, you know, Alistair has joined me from Lambeth and Southwark Mind. Mind is an organisation in the UK, a leading organisation in the UK for mental health and mental health and well-being, really. So, and you also represent not only locally, but you're on the larger organisational, is it one of the boards as well? Do you represent on one of the boards there as well?
Yeah, so we're basically work with something called the London Minds, which are basically a group of minds, about 17 of us, that represent issues that affect minds in London, but also national issues as well. So we have a voice, and that voice, fortunately for myself, we've been involved with local MPs in my area in regard to, we talk about national issues, something called the Mental Health Act reform, which wasn't something that was looked at in 2021. The Mental Health Act reform is an act that was looking at how people are, their sections. And unfortunately, within Lambeth and Southwark Mind, we have a high number, or even nationally even, there's a high number of people from marginalized communities that are sectioned. So that means that was an issue. So we, as a local charity, we looked at our local landscape, but nationally, why is this happening? But also, how could we change the act to be a bit more supportive? You use the word, Tony, compassionate, so that people feel not targeted, but supported to get the help. We had a massive reach in contribution to that, which led us to going to Parliament. A year ago, I went to Parliament to lobby this with regard to Helen Hayes of the MP for Norwood and Florence Eshalomi, the MP for Vauxhall. So we had a local mind had a national presence on something that was dealt with nationally in 2021, which is being put through right now as we speak.
No, that's fantastic. That's great. So if anyone's watching right now, why don't you tell us about what support looks like for you locally in terms of mental health and well-being? Do you know where to reach out if you need particular services? I know that if you are in the UK, and I'm just going to put it on the ticker here, if you are in the UK, there is a number you can call, 0300 123 3393. That is the National Mind, and they can redirect you. And of course, Alistair is in Lambeth and Southwark Mind, and you just got the website there as well. So I'll leave that ticker on for people that are watching. If they're local, they can reach out. And, you know, you have a team of people that are out helping. Yeah,
we do. So, Tony, to answer your question, if somebody has an inquiry about mental health, they can go for a National Mind or they can go for a local mind. We have something called an information service. So anything related to mental health, we have an online support or an email address or a phone number where you can contact us, and we will signpost you to a service that we produce or provide, or something locally in another area, or which is probably not what we actually cover, because any service that you provide requires funding. We don't provide everything, but we could signpost any individual to a service with other organizations. Mental Health Foundation, which is the national organization, Together. There are so many organizations that we work together with, but not only mental health. As you know, Tony, there is a cost of living crisis in the UK. So we are working with the Citizens Advice Bureau. We're working with an organization called Trussell Trust, which is a food bank, because people are worried about food, how they're going to eat.
So it's
and
not just mental well-being or mental health. It's more about, not more about, but it's a whole partnership, isn't it?
It's a whole partnership.
And all the stakeholders. So what you're saying is that each local mind is associated with a range of stakeholders that can support, whether it be debt advice, whether it be food banks, whether it be
housing, poverty.
Wow. Okay. So that's really comprehensive, isn't it?
Because what we realize, Tony, that if you're worried about how you're going to eat or how you're going to pay a debt, it affects your mind. So we are integral in that, where we are working with these organizations to get to provide the best support.
And I'm really for this multidisciplinary approach. That's and that's exactly one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on here. I've known you a little while now, Alistair, so I'm really familiar with the work that you have done as well. So let's just kind of put that one out there, that you've done a great deal, whether it be, around your Minds Quality Mark locally, you sit on the board and you've influenced in terms of doing some research and things like that, and influenced in terms of those legislation papers, and you've been in parts of consultative groups. So really, let's just acknowledge where you've come from, and I can just hear the passion in your voice as you speak right now. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So what we've got, Melody is saying Clubhouse International, not the app, is a clubhouse for those with serious mental health issues. It's designed with a work order day and addresses both social and work support. Thank you so much. That's not something that I was so familiar with, but were you familiar with that?
Yes, there's actually one based in Lambeth. So it's called the Clubhouse. The actual model came from America. So it's an American model, and it's been adopted locally in the UK. But we actually work with this charity in Lambeth with what the people they're supporting. We work alongside this particular organization as well. So it's a holistic approach as well, which we naturally are a part of, because we want to support people in Lambeth and Southwark.
Okay, so let's just kind of take it from this perspective. You talked about cost of living crisis. You've talked about the change in the economy, housing, all of these kinds of things. So if we're talking about an employer or an organization that's listening right now or watching this back on a replay, what are 2 or 3 key tips that you can say to them? Look out for your employees. You've mentioned already making sure that they've got a wellness plan in place. What other things? Are there 2 or 3 things that you can share? And then we can move on to individual help.
I would say, Tony, to any employer out there now, is something called the mental health at work. It's called the mental health first aid at work. And what that is, it's almost like a toolkit for supporting employers and employees at work. We offer training. We offer this training. It's like a toolkit, a first aid kit. But what it covers, Tony, as you've mentioned at the very beginning of this program, it talks about having champions in your workplace who are trained on a course. They go on a course for 2 or 3 days, where they get a qualification where they're able to recognize symptoms of anxiety, any type of mental health challenge. Employees within an employer would be able to track that and obviously deal with that within their organization. We provide this training. So we ourselves, since the pandemic, our numbers of this training has gone through the roof, because employers are now taking the fact that, well, we're not equipped efficiently to see the signs of employees struggling. So the mental health first aid at work is a toolkit that allows employers to train their employees and develop champions in the workplace. So they're looking out up to their colleagues within their workplace to ensure that they're being supported in their journey. Now, of course, we have the employee assistance program where you pick up the phone, but this is more targeted to employees within an organization looking proactively for signs in someone. So if you see somebody not looking very well,
when I do my work around change and this piece, I really the first thing that I do is I look for the workforce development plan, and that has a variety of different areas with separate policies or strategies around what they're doing for their staff. It could be reward and pay, it could be holiday, it could be recognizing difference or diversity, etc. And it could also be encompassing, what you're talking about here, mental well-being and anxiety. And then there's other sections that are around diversity, neurodiversity, that kind of thing. So, ultimately, for employers, this is another thing that you have to be thinking about. This is, one of the things that you have to be thinking about when you're thinking about your staff holistically. All of it. So I'm really interested in finding out more. Can you just give us a little bit more around this training? Because anyone that's listening here that's based in the UK will be able to go and find out. They can come to you and find out about it. They can ring up and find out about it, and the relevance and the importance of it, because you mentioned that it will be able to spot signs of anxiety. Is that right?
Correct. So it's, I will share it in the chat, Tony. It's a course that is run by an organization called Mental Health England. They produce a workbook. They produce a package of basically a course that you have to be trained to run the course. So of course, working for Mind, we have trainers that are trained with Mental Health England to run the course. So we are charged by Mental Health England to purchase the resources, and we run the course. So you could have a one-day course. Typically people choose a 2-day course, and ideally it's not run remotely, it's run face-to-face. It's a course that is run probably, I would say, no more than 12 people, but it's a 2-day course where every element of mental health is covered, so that the individual that attends, Tony, leaves there feeling empowered, equipped, but knowing the signs proactively, what to do if somebody's displaying some sort of mental health challenge. And it's important to note that, Tony, because many people will not approach and say, I'm struggling with depression, anxiety.
This is it. And this is because what you're describing is a very compassionate model.
Correct.
It's about recognizing. Compassion is about removing, easing the suffering of others by moving to action. So you're really not only in that space, but you're moving to the action piece. And what you're saying is that program helps you to know what to do. Because if I go, you talk about Mental Health England, and one of the stats that I got from them in their report says that before the pandemic, it was estimated that 70% of the general population have been exposed either directly or indirectly to a traumatic event at some point in their lifetime.
Correct.
And, we talk about trauma, some of the most stressful events, you could be going through a divorce, you could be moving home, you could be,
a death.
Yeah. There could be a death. Do you see what I mean? So, and these are things, and the pandemic was quite traumatic in itself anyway, wasn't it?
Definitely.
Now, I must admit that even when everything opened back out, I had to literally be thinking very consciously about getting out.
Sure.
Because I was just getting so comfortable being in the house,
Yes.
So, and you have to kind of, even when you think, I could do that online, really, I have to put myself in that space of, no, I'm going to physically go. And a lot of the things that you're talking about in terms of mental health are not things that can be done online either. They have to be done face to face. So thank you so much for that. 70% have been exposed. You talked about 3 out of 4. So the numbers are there.
Yes.
And it's touching lots of people, more or less
everyone
in some way or another. And one of the things I would say to employers before we move on to individuals is this, and that is that how often do we tell people to reach out if they need anything? But when we lead with care and compassion, we reach in too. So don't wait for the employee to come to you and say, I have a problem. It is our duty as employers to be proactive, look out for it, understand the signs, keep putting the feelers out there, keep reaching in and going from there. So that's the proactive approach. Thank you so much, Alistair. So what about, we talked about from employers' perspective. What about from individual employees' perspective? What are the kind of things that they can do?
Yeah, I mean, from a practical perspective, Tony, because I work with employees myself, and one of the things, Tony, that we tend to neglect and we talk about a lot, we talk about health, eating right, but what about exercise and making sure that we are, doing our steps, our 10,000 steps a day. And Tony, we laugh at that, but do you know what that does to your mind? Going outside if you walk fast, Tony, it could be less than half an hour to do 10,000 steps. But just you can imagine the impact it has on your body and your mind. Going outside, running, walking, listening to music, or even going in the garden when the weather's okay, Tony.
Absolutely. But it's important. I must admit, so I've had my Fit Watch for a little while now, and I've been counting my steps because I count them
all the time.
And so I'm kind of always competing with myself and getting closer to this 10,000. Yeah. But when I didn't have it, you just don't realize that,
absolutely,
you're not moving around as much. So, and the long-term impact on your mental health and your mental well-being. So, so this is really important. So
employees need to take that on board. We need to take that on board.
So maybe when we think about anxiety, deadlines, which you quite rightly pointed out earlier on, sitting around your desk, maybe just have a break, go move away from your desk for 10 minutes, go and stretch your legs, go and get a glass of water, a cup of tea or whatever it is, and come back, go and speak to a colleague, by the water cooler for a moment and break it up. Because I know what it's like when you're sitting in front of the computer and you're really going at this deadline and under pressure.
And Tony, you mentioned the water cooler. Some of us are still working from home. That's the reality now. The work environment has changed. But Tony, we can be creative. We have something called Tea and Chat. Every week, every other week, we meet up for 30 minutes as an organization, and we call it a drop-in tea and chat, where whoever's available between 10:30 and 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, you jump in on a drop-in call. Make sure you've got your mug of tea or your water, and we're not talking about shop. We're just talking about ourselves.
Absolutely.
Our hairstyle, our long hair like mine, or whatever it is, or the coronation recently. But the idea is just we want to talk with each other that makes us feel good.
Well, you want to connect as well. Because I used to have something very, very similar. An open session, and that was just
an open door.
I used to call it an open door. So mine used to be on a Thursday. Mine used to be from 10 till 12 o'clock, and people used to come for 10 minutes, and they would come for 10 minutes. And sometimes they would come with something to talk about. Other times they just want to come and have a cup of coffee or come and say hi. And this would be really, really important.
Absolutely.
It's so important for them. And I found that when I was going online and doing this online, it was actually easier, Alistair, for the simple fact being is that when I had a physical building, people would come in, knock the door and come in. But if someone was in there, then they would see who was in there before them. But now when I do it online, it's like I've got a waiting room. I can say, just give me 2 minutes.
Give me 2 minutes.
I can let you out. I can let you out before I let the next person in, and they wouldn't even know that you've been there. But just knowing, and also it means that I can still do some work, because if someone comes in the waiting room, the doorbell will go and I can see who it is. So just having that as a closed, on a reduced screen on my PC is really, really helpful. And staff know, because then it reduces your own anxiety, because you're not always interrupted all the time. They know that they can catch you. They can catch Tony. It's on Thursday between this time.
At this time, correct.
So those kind of practices are really, really great. So
and very practical as well.
Very practical. So you've given some good tips for organizations, some real great tips for individuals as well. And so just share basically some of the work that you've been doing locally. What are the local themes that are coming through for you in the area that you work with in London, Alistair?
Sure. So Tony, for those who are not aware of London, I work within Lambeth and Southwark, which is South London. And unfortunately, Tony, in Lambeth and Southwark, we have one of the highest rate of psychosis, of mental health, not just in London, not just in the UK, this is in Europe. So it tells you, Tony, the magnitude of the work that I'm working with. We are one of the only minds, Tony, that provide a free service. So we provide psychotherapy that is free to anyone that's a Lambeth or Southwark resident. We also provide what's called peer support, where you would be with a group of people that have lived experiences and you get to meet and talk about your issues. Or at the moment, you could meet face to face or you could meet online. We also, Tony, do a lot of work with mental health wards in South London, supporting people that are in mental health institutions, supporting them on the wards, but also post-ward work as well, that we're ensuring that they get rehabilitated and get back into the environment as well.
It's a whole 360, isn't it? It's
a 360. There are so many things, Tony. Unfortunately, in the UK, we have a very high rate of suicide amongst males from the age group of about 25 upwards. So we are working not just on our own as a local mind, we're working with several minds around suicide prevention and bereavement support, because it's an area that is becoming it's increasing. And we want to ensure that we are positioned to have an option where people are able to talk to somebody and get that support before it's too late.
I think that's really valuable that you've mentioned that, because I don't think people realize, the impact of the work you do. You've talked earlier on about the partnerships,
sure,
around that, whether it be debt, whether it be other areas, housing, yes, depression, all kinds of things. So now, you've got a comprehensive service and dealing with so many different areas that are related. And I think that is so important. So if you are in the UK, do check out www.mind.org.uk. And if you are in Lambeth or Southwark, then Alistair and his team want to hear from you, see how they can help you. Correct. And, just before we kind of round up, Alistair, just tell us a little bit more about what's going on nationally in terms of the work that you're doing. We talked about the research you're doing. We talked about how you're influencing legislation. We talked about the board to get some of those regular themes and patterns coming through. So what's on the bigger agenda in terms of mental health and well-being?
I think, Tony, the biggest agenda is the need for support, and the government. The government is struggling because of the cost of living. They're trying to assert more money or invest more money into the NHS, which is one of our main providers and funders, to ensure that we are able to support people that are in need. But as you can imagine, the needs are great. We have something in England called the Child Adolescents Mental Health Service, which is catering for people up to 18 years old, which will be, the acronym is CAMS. They are completely oversubscribed. So we are working alongside the NHS to be almost like an outlet to support the national agenda. So what I mentioned at the very beginning, we are part of a federated group of minds. There are 110 minds in the UK. We are working nationally with the government to ensure that we are providing a service that is touching and reaching people that are in need. That doesn't mean we're trying to supersede the NHS, but we're working in collaboration and partnership, because, Tony, when we look at the news and we look at the statistics, it's quite depressing, the range of need that is required around people in our communities that are just not being met. So we're collaborating, we're lobbying, and we're campaigning to ensure that there is more funding available for institutions to work. But also, Tony, we have to be proactive as well. And we are working nationally also with organizations to support us and fund us and donate to mental health, so that we could work locally and nationally to provide
that's great. Well, I've known you for a little while, Alistair, and I also know that you've done some work internationally as well. Even though you're very modest, I know that you've been out there internationally in different countries. So you bring an awful lot of wealth and knowledge to this area. But, I just want to pick up on something, because I'm sure it's relevant for lots of different charities as well. And you mentioned about the cost of living, and I'm just going to ask you about funding. What's it been like getting funding for organizations like yourself to continue these valuable services?
Tony, how much time do we have? It's been a massive challenge because of the impact of COVID, the restriction of funding within the government itself, and locally as well, even with our local authorities as well. But I have to say, Tony, that the strength of being proactive and working in collaboration with national organizations like, for example, I mentioned the National Mental Health Foundation, but also local organizations where you can, for example, bid or go for a tender, not just as mine, but with other organizations like Citizen Advice, Trussell Trust Food Bank that I mentioned at the beginning, where you are greater in numbers than on your own.
So it's more a partnership approach and thinking about
absolutely, it's a collaborative approach. Yeah,
absolutely. So is that an invitation in some way, Alistair, that if anyone watches this back and they want to partner with you in any way, or want to do a fundraising initiative, or
it's an invitation in two ways: join us, partner with us, work with us, support us. There are so many opportunities, and Tony, opportunities doesn't mean just about putting money in our bank account. It could be donating your time in corporate social responsibility. It could be any way that you feel that you can give in some way. We would take it with open arms. And I'm happy to say, Tony, that since I've been with the organizer for the last 2 or 3 years, we are growing our volunteer base. So we do things at local football clubs, generating funding to support what we're doing to move forward. And the idea, Tony, is to create an awareness that we are here to support you. We are here nationally to support the United Kingdom as well.
Wow. And Alistair, it makes my heart feel really warm when I listen to the work that you're doing. I just think that you're a great advocate for Mind. Nationally, I know that you're the chief exec of Lambeth and Southwark, but I mean, I know you professionally, so I'm aware of some of the work that you've actually been doing. And I really, really wanted to take this opportunity. Mind Mental Health Week coming up next week. Yes. And you've given some tips about some of the things that people can do. We think about mental well-being, mental health, mental fitness, as Melody's saying, all across the year, 24 hours a day. It's not just 1 week, but it's a week where it's particularly highlighted. So,
correct.
Alistair's given you some tips. If you want to reach out to him directly, if you want to partner with him or ask about how you can help, then, do get in touch. And if you want some general support and help, then you can reach out to Mind UK. So how are we going to conclude this? Have you got a message that you want to leave with people that may be watching now or watching it back?
Yeah, I just have a very small message, Tony. One is at the end will be a promotion, but the main message, Tony, is that we're working in this environment for a number of years. What I'm pleased to say, with the right support, people overcome mental health. That's the key. And it's ensuring that people reach out. And also, if people are not reaching out, as you mentioned at the beginning, Tony, we as work colleagues or employers or subordinates actually see the signs to make sure we are being proactive to support our staff, our friends or our family members. And I think finally, Tony, as the last point, Mental Health Week is next week. We are doing 2 special days on Tuesday and Thursday, an online program. But Mental Health Week is not a week. It's, as you correctly said, we are here 24/7, 7 days a week to support. Mental Health Week is just a week to highlight, but we are here every day, 24/7, 7 days a week to support you and everyone that's listening and anyone that may listen in the future as well. And I just want to give people hope that you can overcome with the support. And I've seen the impact, and it's a wonderful.
That's a real important message there. And hope is everything, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because people are thinking about this stigma that you can't, when you have mental health, you have a problem for, forevermore. But actually, you're saying that with the right support and assistance, you can overcome it. And I think that there is no better way to capture that. And I just want to kind of leave by saying something that I said earlier on, and that is that how often do we say, reach out if you need some help, reach out if you want assistance. But when we lead with care and compassion, we take responsibility to reach into. And I just want to leave that right there. And I just want to say thank you so much, Alistair. You've been a fantastic guest.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. I hope we get invited back again. I have a great team of talented individuals, Tony, that I'd love to bring them to be a part of the sharing as well.
Absolutely. I would absolutely. Let's get that sorted. Let's get that booked in.
I like
I'd
that.
love to hear from your team, what they're doing. Any opportunity to get the words out. There are so many people that are, suffering right now. And in the words of compassion, we must alleviate some of that suffering by moving to action. And on that note, I just want to say a few people that have dropped by, Melody and David in particular, who have come into the chat stream. I just want to say thank you. And for those that are kind of, you know, watching in the background and taking note, thank you so much. And on that note, let's think about what we're going to do for mental well-being next week. And in fact, not just next week, every week. Every day. Absolutely. And on that note, I'm just going to say thank you, Alistair, and
welcome.
Great work that you're doing. And bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending time with me and my guest today on Critical Reflections with Your Critical Friend. Today, you got just a very, very small sprinkling of Tony's fairy dust. But if you'd like more, then do reach out for speaking or hosting. It's TonyMcClelland.com. For social impact, social justice, or social mobility, check out our work at firstlifegroup.com. I look forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, feel encouraged, be inspired, be empowered, and make a difference. Bye for now.